And you mentioned having a little homestead, and we're talking about resiliency and flexibility. And I think, the idea of homesteading and being resilient in many ways, like emotionally, but financially, food resilience, water resilience, all these things. Like, I think the pandemic, at least for myself and other people, sort of had us asking, like, is our government resilient? Is our healthcare system resilient? Like a lot of these questions, or even can it be anti-fragile? And so there's a question there that I'm trying to put together, but yeah,
I can just respond to it. You don't have to ask a question.
that'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah. So resiliency is an interesting one, and having a homestead is connected to that, because one of the reasons why we created this homestead is because I wanted to feel like we could be we could live on our own if we needed to. Now, we really couldn't live, we like really couldn't, but there's only so many eggs and honey you can eat and kale, right? But what it created for me was a sense of security of like, wow, I'm putting something into the ground and I'm taking something out of the ground, and I'm sort of biodynamically whatever taking care of this land in a way that it works. Humans are really good. If you look at ecosystems, humans are really good at producing and they're really good at consuming, but they're not so good about that third part of an ecosystem, which is decomposing.
Mm.
And the decomposing part is the full circle, right? Of being able to see, to close the loop. And so the psychology version of that is that humans are also really good at producing content and consuming content, but we're not very good at decomposing. And what is decomposing in the psychology realm? It's pausing, resting, receiving, having space and silence in our conversations. So I think of ecosystems on the, sort of the micro level and the macro level, and it all fits together in my brain. I hope it fits together in other people's brains. So I'm talking about this, but it fits together in my mind as like a big model that we could use to understand, okay, especially as we're coming out of COVID, what is it? What is my ecosystem? What did I learn about which parts were missing and which parts I needed to build back in? A lot of people, when everything shut down initially, they had a secret, oh, thank gosh, I don't have to go to this, I don't have to go to that, I can stay home for a week. There was a little bit of relief and horror, and fear, and they both can happen at the same time. That's okay. But look at that relief. What was that about for you? What was the decomposition that you were needing that you weren't getting? And then look at what was scary for you, because what was scary for you points to your values as well. What were you afraid of losing that matters to you? And the other part of it is, what were you kind of like okay about losing? And then you realize that didn't really matter to me as
Mm.
much.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Thinking of decomposing uh, as psychologically. This actually, so there's something I'm experiencing right now. Actually, it's kind of interesting, timely for me. Um, a lot of projects in my business and work have just sort of wrapped up. Just sold a house, just finished a year-long mastermind. Just sort of like I have a lot more space in my schedule in the last few weeks. All of a sudden, starting actually this week, and I feel like there's a little bit of a pivot, a little of a opportunity for me to sort of like do my next big thing, my next creative project, like maybe like the equivalent of a PhD, like a multi-year journey towards a big thing in the world. And um, I struggle with the sort of like I need to be learning a lot and consuming and preparing, and then sometimes I force myself just to like lie down and do nothing, and like force myself to be okay with just being. So it's kind of an edge for me just to like wander around aimlessly, for example.
Yeah.
um,
So there's a little bit of, I would say, potential emotional avoidance there in doing and striving. And striving is something that I've gotten really interested in because of my own history of striving. I mean, an eating disorder is like you're like an Olympian of striving if you can get yourself down to a crazy low weight, right? So the nature of when we strive and we keep doing, and we're trying to fill the spaces, and we're trying to fill the spaces because it's uncomfortable to sit in the spaces, I think that that's something to look at. And I also think that striving can be a really beautiful thing when we're striving towards values rich goals, things that matter to us, things that you feel like you're offering in the world. Um, so, my guess is that probably both of those would be of benefit to take a moment to look at it like, what's so uncomfortable about being here? Because there's a lot on your plate, Derek. You have a 2 year old and a 4 year old. There's plenty. Like you could do nothing and you would have plenty. There's the business of living.
Hmm.
And the business of living and just sort of like the chop wood, carry water of life is actually how humans lived for many, many years, right? Our work was our family, and our family was our movement, and our food was our movement. We moved to get food. Now we move to get rid of food. So it's really interesting to think about sort of these ways in which we think we need to go do something. And I think there's also I've gotten really interested in this. There's a type of therapy called compassion focused therapy, and Debbie and I include a little bit of this in the first chapter of the book. And we call the first chapter preparing the ground, creating nutrient dense, nutrient rich soil
Hmm.
before you start learning new skills. And the preparing the ground component of the book was about three things. It was about compassion, self-care, and intentional use of time. And the compassion part was based on this researcher's work, Paul Gilbert, who's from the UK, the Compassionate Mind Foundation. And what he talks a lot about is how to cultivate the part of our brain and our body that helps balance out our threat and drive system. Because our threat and drive, especially I think in high performers like you, Derek, you got a lot of drive. And that's good. There's nothing wrong with having a drive system. That's how you win awards and how you win races and how you go through adventures. But it can get out of balance and it can actually lead us to feeling dissatisfied because we need to also have contentment. We also need to have a space where we feel soothed and compassion and contentment and nurtured. And, that's the decomposition, I guess, of the ecosystem. And that would be maybe a place to explore before you start going into drive again.
Mm, thank you. Yeah. Is there a particular exercise in the book that, or
Yeah.
one of the days that I should look at for that?
Well, I think a really great place to start in the book is this three circle diagram. And listeners could even do this in their mind or do it on a piece of paper where you start by thinking about these three systems: threat, like what makes you feel afraid, you want to fight, flight, freeze, adrenaline, epinephrine, amygdala, threat. And then we have drive, and then we have soothing. And you start with drawing a circle of each. How big is your threat system right now? How big is your drive system right now? Like what size would that circle be? And then how big a circle would your soothing system be or your content system be?
Hmm.
And many times people find that like one circle is really big. And it's often not the soothing content one, I'll just say. It's not the satisfied, I feel complete, I feel enough, I have enough, I am enough, there is enough. That's the content system. And oftentimes we don't feel that. So when you get a sense of the size of these, you can start to look at three things. You can look at what are the things in my life that are activating this system? What's activating my threat system right now? What's activating my drive system? What's activating my contentment system? And we can think about those as being things outside of ourselves or inside of ourselves, because we can activate our own drive system by our own feelings of not enoughness, right?
Hmm.
And then I like to look at, because I like embodied based practice, what does it feel like in my body when I'm in those three systems? How do I know the difference? When I'm in threat, what does it feel like? Is it energy rising, or is it closing down, or is it, fleeing and fighting? What does it feel like in my body when I'm in drive, right? And then what does it feel like in my body when I'm in content? Safeness. The third thing I have people look at is, what do I do? How am I acting in a way when these systems get activated for me that keeps them going, that reinforces them, right? And so we can think about what are the things when I'm in drive and I'm in overdrive. I tend to speak more quickly. I rush through things. I add things to my schedule.
Hmm.
And it just makes me more in drive. When I'm in threat, I tend to shut down, I isolate, I don't talk to people, and that just makes me feel more threat. And then what are the things that I could do that would help cultivate more of a sense of security, safety, compassion? And that's often like sort of like slowing down our breathing, being with someone we love, practicing compassionate, encouraging self, talk to myself, being in nature for me, like in the garden. So things like that that would maybe help you with your contentment system. And then once you have those questions answered, you can start to look at through your day, where am I at? Scale 1 to 10, am I in threat? Scale 1 to 10, am I in drive? Scale 1 to 10, am I in contentment? And what do I need to balance these out a little bit more? I'm giving the example of a high drive, but I work a lot with clients that are also depressed, and their drive is like through the floor. So I need to up their drive. We need to up the behavioral activation. We need to say, okay, we're going to get more action into your day because there's not enough. But the sense I have of you, Derek, is that there's too much.
Yeah, you must be good at what you do.